Need a new tantanmen recipe? These Somen noodles might be just what you're looking for if you enjoy a bit of spicy flavor or heat with a little bit of cool, creamy texture, just in time for summer. Did you know that in Kyoto, Japan, sometimes the summers can be very hot and humid? One of my favorite ways to beat the heat in Japan and at home is with cold food and cold drinks. Though sometimes I really like hot food too, and to clarify, that means both temperature hot and fire hot or spicy hot. What about you? Let me know in the comments right now. So this tantanmen takes a little bit of inspiration from both Chinese cuisine and a little bit of Japanese cuisine, so it is more of a fusion dish. And in particular, what I really enjoy about this are the Japanese mushrooms. So you might be wondering, do somen noodles go with Japanese mushrooms? Well, yes, they do, surprisingly. Or maybe you're not surprised. Japanese mushrooms are a peculiar and magical bunch. They come in all different shapes and sizes and a variety of flavors and benefits, mostly nutritional, of course. And if you don't like mushrooms, or you have a picky eater in your family or in your household, it's likely that they won't even notice the flavor. So you might not need to tell them. Curious? I'll tell you why in just a bit. For this recipe, you're going to need about 1.5 cups of Japanese mushrooms, finely chopped. I used a combination of shiitake, maitake, shimeji, and eringi. You're going to be cooking these in about a tablespoon of sesame oil, along with about a tablespoon of toubanjian, which is a spicy chili paste, 2 tablespoons of sake, and about 2 to 3 teaspoons of shoyu or soy sauce. For the noodles, you want about 1 bunch of somen noodles per person. And then 1 bunch of chard, rainbow chard is what I used, and you want the leaves only, which are going to be steamed in a little bit of water. For the toppings, you're going to be using a little bit of layu or chili oil, white pepper or black pepper if you prefer that, as well as a little bit of toasted and ground sesame seeds, and optional, chopped green onions or shiso. For the actual broth for the somen noodles, you're going to be using about 2 to 3 teaspoons of toubanjian, 2 teaspoons of vegetable stock concentrate. I use better than bouillon vegetable stock or vegetable base. 2 teaspoons of miso paste. You can use red or white. 2 tablespoons of nerigoma, also known as tahini. You want the white version or the brown colored version if you can find that. 1.5 cups of soy milk, unsweetened and unflavored, of course. You don't want vanilla flavors in this dish. At least I don't. And about 1 to 2 teaspoons of honey or sugar to balance out some of the salty and spicy flavors. All you need to do is combine all of the ingredients together, the soy milk, the nerigoma or tahini, the miso paste, the vegetable stock concentrate, the toubanjian, and the sweetener, and then puree it in a blender or immersion blender, and then set it aside until it's ready to use. Keep it cool so that you have a cool broth once it's ready to serve. So some of the tips for the somen noodles. If you haven't cooked with these before, make sure that you're using plenty of water when you're cooking them. Somen noodles on their own don't have much of a strong flavor, so really they are just the vehicle for all of the deliciousness that the mushrooms are going to be carrying right into your mouth. Once your somen noodles are done cooking, you're going to be draining them and then rinsing them with some cold water to help expedite the cooling, and then you're going to soak it in an ice water bath to keep the temperature cold until they are ready to be served. I usually like to place a strainer into a water bath so that I can actually just lift up the strainer when they're ready to serve and then drain them. So if you want to try doing that, that would be recommended. And also make sure that you drain them thoroughly. You can give them a good squeeze if you haven't done that before to make sure that there isn't a ton of water that's still stuck to those noodles, because nobody likes a diluted somen noodle dish. At least I do not. When you're ready to serve the somen noodles, make sure that you drain the noodles thoroughly so that they don't dilute your sauce or your seasoning. And then you should be good to go. So the first thing that you're going to be cooking are the Japanese mushrooms, and make sure that you cut them into very small pieces. Also, use a variety of mushrooms to give you more of a complex flavor. They all do taste quite different from each other, at least I think so. As you notice, I've finely chopped them, which helps to enable them to cook quicker, as well as increase the surface area, which is going to help to bring more flavor with each bite. So you want to saute them for a good 20 to 30 minutes until they have caramelized and turned much smaller in terms of the size and a little bit crispy on the outside. And that's going to help to give you a nice texture. That's about halfway through. I usually add in the sake as well as the toubanjian and the soy sauce and keep cooking it on medium-low heat, stirring occasionally until it is done. So if you're wondering why the mushrooms are not going to taste like mushrooms in this dish, here are several reasons. The first is that we are going to be cooking them for a longer period of time so that they caramelize, which helps to not only enhance the umami, but bring out some of the natural sweetness of the mushrooms when they caramelize. So it's going to decrease the funkiness or the funky mushroomy flavor that may or may not be pleasant depending on your tastes. It's also going to increase the sweet and savory umami components that help to synergize with all the other ingredients that we're using. And it helps to make the texture a little bit more firm, a little bit more chewy, just like your favorite minced meat, even though we're not using any meat in this. So to summarize that tip, make sure you cook the mushrooms longer than you think is necessary. Regarding the toubanjian or the chili paste, it's quite strong in flavor if you've never had it before, and it may or may not be strong in the spiciness department. So what I mean is, usually Chinese brands might be a little bit more spicy than a Japanese brand, but of course, try different brands out and see what you prefer. And if you like things a little bit on the spicier side, you can use a little bit more of the toubanjian, or if you like things less spicy, then you might want to try a different recipe. Kidding? I mean, not really, actually. So even though this recipe may not be considered spicy, as compared to maybe spicy Thai food, spicy Indian food, spicy Mexican food, or other spicy cuisines, it can be a little bit spicy depending on how sensitive you are. I'm only half kidding when I say try a different recipe. It's totally up to you, but in my opinion, it's not that spicy. Probably on between a 1 and a 5, 5 being the most spicy. I would say this is probably like a 2, maybe a 3. So in order to make this tantanmen somen your own, I think you have a few options for making some modifications without really altering the original flavor of the dish too much. And one is going to be to substitute the vegetable stock with your favorite other stock. Maybe it's a chicken or a beef stock, for example. I use the Better Than Bouillon brand. If you use those alternatives of that brand, I think you should be fine. In addition, you can also use different types of miso paste. Today I used a white miso that was made with shiokoji. You can also use a red miso, which is going to be a little bit darker in flavor, or a different type of white miso, which is going to be lighter and sweeter in flavor. And depending on your preferences and your tastes, if you have something that's a little bit darker or more savory, you might want to balance that out with a little bit of honey or sugar. And on the other side, if you're using white miso that's more sweeter, like a saikyo miso, which is a white miso, you could add in maybe like a dash or two of shoyu or soy sauce to make things a little bit more savory. And if you really don't want to use Japanese mushrooms, you have a couple options. I think one is to use a whole grain or cracked grain like bulgur or farro. Those could be some good alternatives to give you sort of that minced meat texture. And in addition, if it is in the winter or the fall season when things are a little bit cooler temperature-wise and you want something a little bit more comforting or a little bit more warming, you could use this exact recipe and serve it over warm brown rice. So that's the alternative. So serve it over warm brown rice with the soup or the broth on the side, sort of like a deconstructed or dry noodle dish, only this time it would be a dry rice dish, if that makes sense. I think it makes sense. It makes sense to me at least. So dry noodles, dry rice. So let me know what you think. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up to let me know. Share this with a friend, somebody that you think would be interested in cooking something like this. If you have any feedback, comments, make sure to share them below. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, subscribe for more plant-based Japanese cooking videos just like the one today. One last thing, if you are ever visiting Japan in the summertime, especially Kyoto, that area of Japan, there's actually a really touristy thing that you can do to eat somen, and that is to eat it after it comes down a hollowed out piece of bamboo. So it's called nagashi somen, which means sort of like flowing somen. And literally, there is flowing water that is coming down hollowed out bamboo pieces. And you can go ahead and pick it up with your ohashi or your chopsticks and eat it straight out of that bamboo piece. So that's something that you may be interested in trying on your next visit. A little bit touristy, but similar to kaiten sushi, which is the sushi that comes around on a conveyor belt. Only this is somen that is coming down a hollowed out piece of bamboo with some water. Touristy, yes. Tasty? You tell me.